The first step is to select a level place to install the track. You'll need 53 feet for the 50-footer and 83 feet for the 80-footer. The drive unit should be supported by 4x4s to keep it out of any wet areas, and then we'll use wood blocking to support the rest of the track and keep it level. Next, we'll start by laying out the track with the 1s together, the 2s together, and so forth. These numbers were put on during assembly, and they should be assembled in the field in the same manner to keep everything straight and true. So we'll start with the 1s and work our way down the track. We'll use 2.5-inch bolts and lock nuts and put them through the pre-drilled holes. There's no need to tighten these too far. We don't want to damage the cross ties. We also want to make sure the joints of the track sections line up perfectly. If they don't, you'll want to tap those in with a rubber mallet to ensure the cart seamlessly rides across the track. Another thing you can do is use a pair of channel locks, and everywhere there's a joint, you can kind of crimp the end in, basically making a very nice transition point for the cart's wheels. So they're kind of bent in right there at the end, and you can help align everything. The smoother the transitions are, you'll get no noise, no bouncing, and everything will just run smoother. Before we put the mover on the track, we want to check the retention brackets to make sure that they're straight. So we'll use a square and we'll put it across the top of the wheel and ensure that there's daylight between the square and the retention bracket. We'll check both sides, so top of the wheels, we've got daylight, and bottom of the wheels, there's still daylight. So that means it won't rub as it goes down the track. So next we'll slide this on. The crow's foot, it looks like a crow's foot on top of where the T-post goes in, that faces forward, and the bracket that trips the sensor goes to the back. So next up is mounting the drive unit. We'll set it on top of our 4x4 blocking. And we've got 6 holes that we need to line up and use the provided bolts and nuts. Right now we're just going to do the 3 across the back. And right here, the front holes were just a little bit off from assembly. So we're taking a 5/16 drill bit and just reaming them out. Now we'll put in the remaining 3 bolts. Step 1 is to take the cable and spread it out the full length of the mover. And we go underneath the cart because the cart won't come off now that it's got those retention brackets. And we make a loop and go around the drive unit motor. And then we'll get the little clevis ready and attach it to the cart, inserting the pin and twisting it until it's finger tight. And then we'll use a crescent wrench to tighten it up the rest of the way. There's also another pin right behind that we're just going to check tightness. Now we go to the other end of the unit, the pulley side, and we need to get it around that pulley. So you're going to use a 6mm wrench and a crescent wrench, and we're going to take that lock nut off and pull the pulley apart. We're going to slip the cable around and then put it right back together. And that can squeeze pretty tight. If the spring comes off, just loop it right back through. Now we'll connect the other side of the cable to the other side of the cart. and same as before. You can also check the length of the cable at this point. If it seems too long or if it's not long enough, you can open those cable brackets and make an adjustment, but it should be pretty close from the factory. Now we'll just connect it to the mover, the same as we did on the other side, and then we're going to go back down to the tensioning, and we're going to tension the spring and the cable. And as far as how much tension to put, if you have a tape measure, we want to be from tip of the spring to tip of the spring between 8 and 9 inches. Right here, we're 8.5 inches. To install the sensor, we'll start by measuring 6 feet from the drive end of the unit. And then we'll go 6 feet 3.5 inches and make another mark. That's for the safety bracket. We'll use the wood and the provided clamp to give us a nice flat bottom to rest the sensor against. We'll set the sensor up there, up against the 6-foot mark, and we'll put in 2 self-tapping screws. The first one's pretty self-explanatory. The next one, we do have to disassemble the sensor wire, and when we reinsert that wire and connect it back together, just keep in mind that they're keyed, so you have to look and see where the little indent mark is to get it lined up correctly. And here we're adjusting the sensor arm. You'll want to slide the mover back and forth, and the key is, a good starting point would be about 1/4 inch up from that bottom, and then we'll lock it down. Right there, a little lower. We'll tighten that down with a Phillips screwdriver, and we'll slide the mover back and forth, making sure everything has clearance. Now we'll mount our wooden clamp back on there for our safety bracket, and we'll use the mark that's 3.5 inches away and 2 self-tapping screws, and now we'll slide the mover again. If you have to make any bends or adjustments, that's fine. Just make sure everything clears nicely, because the mover will be sliding over that all the time, so you want to make sure it's perfect. And then there's our sensor bracket, just has 1 self-tapping screw. Next, we have our cable guards. These are pretty easy to install. There's just 2 hex bolts, and that protects the cable from any spall coming off of your target. We'll do the same for both sides. Make sure it covers up the cable. Now here's our T-post bracket. Keep in mind this has multiple positions, and you want to keep your target over the cart. So if you've got a big bracket and a heavy target, you may need to move it back a position instead of in the middle. And we'll install our T-post and our target. This one has a small 22 target on it, so we kept the center position for the T-post holder. Next, we'll install our rebar safety stops. And from the drive end side, we're going to measure 46 inches and put our 2 pieces of rebar. And they should be high enough to catch the cart. If something happened to go wrong, the cart's not going to damage itself, damage the drive end side. So this is just a safety protection device that we end up just blowing a fuse instead of damaging the unit. So then from the pulley side, we measure 58 inches and install our other rebar posts. And that's about how close it gets to the pulley when those are installed correctly. If we open up the control box, you'll see some numbers written down. We've got a remote control address. If you get a remote or have to order a remote, that's your address. And we've got a speed balance number as it arrives from the factory. The speed balance will go over a little more detail, but that's it right there, that little set screw. We'll go over that more in the instructions, but if you need to change your forward and reverse speeds independent of each other, that's how you do it. You shouldn't mess with that setting unless you have to. Down in the corner, we've got spare fuses inside the box for you. The first one we'll cover is a 20 amp slow blow fuse. That is for the motor. If you need to change it, it's inside that little box. And if the lights are on but the motor's not running, there's a good chance it's that fuse right there. Now, if you're not getting power at all, there's another fuse. It's a 25 amp, and that's for the main unit. It's right inside that compartment. And you can visually see these if they're burnt or not. Just pull them out and take a look up at the sunlight. One more fuse. It's right in the 12 volt battery connector. That's a 30 amp. Those are the only 3 fuses in the unit. Here's what comes when you order the remote control. You have a receiver box and a cable along with your remote. So now we need to hook up the receiver box. There's a little knockout in the housing. Knock that out right there and insert the wire through. And we'll install and tighten down the nut. Next, we have a little split cover, and that will slip over the wire, kind of breaks in half, slips over the wire, and covers that hole from anything else getting in there. And when we attach the cables, keep in mind there's a little key on both sides that have to match up. So you need to find that and make sure they go together correctly. And that's it for the control box side. Now we just have to mount the receiver. We'll mount that on a T-post forward of the unit slightly and at least 4 feet off the ground. By mounting it forward, you prevent it from getting hit with spall from the target. And then you can use zip ties or wire ties, and we'll just tie it up to the T-post. Next, we'll hook up our battery terminals with the supplied cable. We'll just take the little nut off the negative side and we'll attach the black wire. And we'll do the same with the positive side and aim those downwards so that it doesn't affect the door opening. And then we've got our 110 plug that you can plug in and then shove everything inside the box, and there's a little half circle there so you can keep the door shut and still have your cable. So inside the box we've got our 12 volt and 110 toggle switch with off in the middle. And then we've got our speed setting from 0 to 3.5. And our time setting from 5 seconds to 65 seconds. So initially how you'd want to set this up is you'd set your speed, but take your time all the way down. And you would let it run and slowly start increasing your time until it gets close to the other end without running into the other end. Then we'll install our sheet metal cover, put the clips on, and that completes the installation. If you have any other questions, please reach out to us at info@grayupcnc.com.